Cosmological argument. First explanation in the cosmological argument, the Big Bang. 13.7 billion years ago the universe is about to begin. It has no dimensions, and is squeezed into a small expansion. This is called the singularity. It existed nowhere and at no time. When the Big Bang happens, it not only starts space, it starts time. The only space that exists is the space it creates as it expands. This creates some questions though. Where did the singularity come from? Why, when we observe cause and effect everywhere, cannot we not see a cause for the expansion of the singularity? Some answer the second with God, however others have referred to this as a God of the gaps argument. Such argument means when something is unanswerable, people fill that with God, originally being the creation of earth. Before we knew about the Big Bang, this would have been God. Before we discovered evolution, the explanation of humanity was God. Is this the same thing happening with the start of the expansion of the singularity? Slipner 1912 measured movement of spiral nebulae, noticed they were moving away from Earth. Hubble 1927 proved speed of galaxies moving away from Earth was connected to distance. Further away the galaxy, faster it moves away. Now known as Hubble's law. If moving away must have started somewhere, now termed the Big Bang. Cosmic microwave background, CMB, proved the Big Bang, radiation remaining from the Big Bang, and can be detected throughout the universe. Second explanation, Aquinas and the three ways. First way, motion and change. Based on posteriori knowledge, which is based on experience rather than knowledge based on not needing experience. Everything is in motion, change, and all changes require something else to move it, Aristotle observation. Therefore there must be a first over. Aristotle named this the initial mover, or prime mover. Aquinas named it the unmoved mover. Aquinas' fire analogy, wood requires ignition to create fire. Wood being potentiality, ignition being efficient cause, and the fire as actuality. Aristotle's sculptor analogy, marble requires a sculptor to create a sculpture. Marble being potentiality, the sculptor being efficient cause, and the sculpture being actuality. These analogies could mean the singularity as potentiality in marble or wood, God as the efficient cause, sculptor or ignition, actuality as the living universe, sculpture or fire. The second way, cause. There are effects in the world, all of these have causes. Without cause there is no effect. Rejected infinite regress an argument which asks what caused God. This can go constantly back, ergo infinite regress. Therefore the question was what must have been the first uncaused cause. For Aquinas the first uncaused cause was God. Domino analogy, in a line of dominoes the first efficient cause is the one that causes the second immediate cause one to fall. If the first had not fallen the second would not. Uncaused causer is the human that set up the dominoes and pushed the first one. The third way, contingency. Everything that exists is contingent, or dependent, on everything else. Everything that exists has the possibility of not existing. If this was true of everything, then nothing would exist. The cause of the universe therefore must be external, and must have always existed, and not be contingent on anything else. Named the necessary being that had a necessary existence. This is God. If he did not exist then nothing else could exist. Some contingent being exist. If any contingent beings exist then a necessary being must exist, therefore a necessary being exists, namely God. The Craig and Kalam infinity argument. Kalam, originally an Islamic philosophy, stems from 9th and 11th centuries. Craig, everything that behind to exist has a cause of its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe must have a cause for its existence. Since there is no scientific explanation can provide a causal account, the mechanics for how the universe was caused, of the origin of the universe, the cause must be personal, personal meaning a non-scientific mechanic explanation for how the universe was caused, meaning that an agent God in Craig's belief caused it. Two types of infinity, actual infinity, that is without start or end, and potential infinity, that is with a start, but without an end. The library analogy. An infinite library filled with infinite black books and infinite red books. The infinite black books would be equal to the infinite red books. However, infinite black books and infinite red books combined would also be equal to the amount of infinite red books alone. This is illogical and therefore impossible, disproving the idea of actual infinity. Hume's critiques of cosmological arguments. Hume is an empiricist, meaning that evidence can only be taken from what can be experienced. Fallacy of composition. Just because something is observable within the universe, this does not mean that we can apply it to the universe itself. We do not know the universe is the effect of a cause, as we have no empirical evidence to support this, and finally, we do not know if the creation of a universe follows the same rules of creations in the universe. We have no experience in creating universes, and therefore we cannot meaningfully talk about it. Even if God could be accepted as the cause of the universe, this does not determine anything about that God. It may not mean a God of classical theism. Why not many gods? As an explanation, there is not enough evidence to say whether the universe had a cause, and certainly not enough evidence to say what that cause might have been. Could have been a random fluke, or a quantum event, as Richard Dawkins stated once. Teleological argument. The design argument, a posteriori argument, meaning that it is knowledge which we can only know from experiencing the world, uses lots and lots of analogies. Basic argument. Everything in the world is complex and shows features of something designed. This cannot have happened by chance, there must have been an intelligent designer behind it. We can see the complex designs with purpose, order, regularity, and this suggests an intelligent infinity great designer, who create all, God. Occam's razor is added to this. The most simplest argument is most often the truest. A singular creator is a simpler argument than something such as millions of chances. First argument in teleology. Aquinas' fifth way, design qua purpose. Something that lacks intelligence cannot move towards a fulfilling useful end unless something with intelligence has moved it. A pen can do nothing without an intelligent being using it to produce something. Likewise, the universe operates through natural laws, classical physics, but themselves have no intelligence. Archer analogy. An archer shoots an arrow at the target. The arrow on its own cannot fulfill its purpose of hitting the target without the archer behind it. Archer guides and releases the arrow, giving it purpose and movement. The archer in this analogy being God or an intelligent being, the arrow being the world and the target being life, humanity. Everything follows natural laws, in doing so fulfills a purpose or end goal. This argument, however, suffers with some confirmation bias, meaning an argument which already subscribes to your previous knowledge. We seem like the end goal because that is what makes sense. Gardener analogy. What would a garden look like without a gardener? Now, what would it look like with a gardener? This is meant to demonstrate that the universe is too ordered to not have an intelligent being. Such as Earth being in the Goldilocks zone, our planet is the only planet that could support life. Second argument, Paley's argument. Similar to the watch analogy, but not the watch analogy. If you saw a watch on the floor on a little walk, you would wonder who designed it. He was from the 1800s, so big a deal for Paley. So why should you not wonder the same for a rock you see on a walk? Maybe because I'm not a neat Paley. The watch analogy compared the eye to a watch, stating that both have design features due to both being so complex. Evolution could be argued as the process of design. Issues with this argument. Anthropomorphism, meaning that it reduces God into a man. Humans also design stuff, such things as a watch. Suggests a designer, sure, but not suggest a godlike figure. Whilst he tried to use biology to support his arguments, he still suffers from a confirmation bias, as it may suggest a designer, but not a godlike figure. Paley is just assuming that. Mechanistic design argument. Based off of inference and off of the mature state theory. Consists of two parts, design qua purpose, design qua regularity. Not only do things have purpose, but they seem to have order, purpose and function. Everything being perfectly ordered. Rotation of the solar system, and how they obey the same universal laws, hold their orbits due to gravity. Argued this could not come about by chance. Concludes an external agent must have imposed order on the universe as a whole. Treats the universe as a mechanical object compared to things which humans make. Concerned with both purpose and order. Uses analogy. Concerned with proportion and scale. Third argument, Tennant's anthropic and aesthetic principle. Anthropic argument, universe is seemingly created for people, humans, intelligent life. The natural world provides everything for life to be sustained. Natural world cannot only be observed, but holds itself up for rational analysis from which we can deduce its workings. Process of evolution through natural selection has led to the development of intelligent human life, to the degree we can observe and analyze the universe it exists in. Weak anthropic principle does not point towards a God, but does apply to everything else. Strong anthropic principle points towards a God as an explanation for this. Scrabble analogy. Imagine a big bag of tiles with letters as large as a building and someone blindfolded took out letter by letter the Old and New Testament. The odds of this happening is the same odds of everything going correct for existence. Suffers from survivorship bias, Hume, which means that we judge it as perfect only because we successfully were able to survive to this point. We only judge based on our success. Tennant's aesthetic principle. If humans evolved through natural selection and survival of the fittest, why do we have useless attributes such as an appreciation of beauty? We examine the natural world in a way that other species do not, as we do in terms of an appreciation of beauty. Things that stir the soul. From a logical or scientific view, only those things that aid your survival are necessary traits. Anything that does not directly aid our survival is eventually evolved out. Tennant claims that an appreciation of existence and of beauty is a direct result of a benevolent God. This beauty, coupled with the revelatory nature of God's existence, is evidence for God as the Creator. God would not only want us to be able to live and survive, but also to enjoy life. Hume returns to critique the teleological argument. Dialogues concerning natural religion. Possibility that the universe was designed does not necessarily mean God designed it. Does not say it is not God, simply that we cannot know that it is God. No empirical evidence. Analogy is not evidence. Especially unsound analogy, because of who designed the designer. Infinite regress, baby. God is also complex and shows features of design, who then designed God, but that creature would also be complex and therefore showing features of design, so who designed them? Other analogies fit just as well, such as Gus, the giant universe spinning spider, or many gods. God must share human qualities if design is true, which lessens his image, and would indicate that he is too designed. God might not be moral or good at making universes. This is something we assume, but have no evidence for. Once again, the universe could be a fluke or accidental, or a quantum event, as Richard Dawkins put it. Ontological argument. The study of existence relies on logic and reasoning. First argument, Anselm's Proslogion 2, a series of prayers and or meditations. His argument of prayer was based on faith, and then reason was used to deepen his understanding of what his faith told him. I do not seek to understand so that I may believe, rather I believe in order to understand. Anselm did not believe in atheists' thought that it was an excuse to be debauched. Anselm basically said, if you don't believe in God you're a whore, which low-key problematic. It means this argument is only relevant to theists. Proof by contradiction argument. There are two conclusions. One is a contradiction of premises, and the other is not. God is that which nothing greater can be conceived of, meaning that it has maximal qualities. Even if someone does not believe in God, they can understand the concept of this greatest possible being. The greatest possible being can exist within the mind. We can also imagine it existing in reality, making it greater. If something only exists in the mind, it is not the greatest possible being, therefore the greatest possible being must exist in reality, and in the mind. Guanillo counters with "on behalf of the fool." The island counter. If God in Anselm's proslogion was replaced with island, it shows Anselm's argument not holding up to logic. We cannot bring something into existence just by defining it. Anselm counters his counter. God has maximal qualities unlike an island. What makes the greatest possible island is subjective. Islands are contingent unlike God. Second argument. Anselm was impressed by the counter though, and would add it to all his later work to debunk this specific argument. This would be a part of Proslogion 3. The greatest possible being would be eternal, not just appearing. The greatest possible being would be eternal, and not cease to exist, making it a necessary being. Third argument, Descartes. God has perfect attributes, one of which is existence. Much like a triangle cannot be drawn without three sides, and three connected sides cannot build any other shape. Compared this to valleys and mountains. Fourth argument, Malcolm's ontological argument. Malcolm argued that God must have necessary existence, not coming in or out of existence. If he already exists, he could not stop existing or start existing suddenly, must be eternal. Argued that God exists he either impossible, sometimes existing, or something not existence, or have necessary existence. Counters to these categories: yes, maybe God is impossible, we do not know. The second option is absurd, as no atheist argues this, and necessary existence is limited, as God could be deistic. Argued that this would not convince atheists, and would make sense to theists though. God is true for those who believe in God. Kant's critiques. Existence is not an attribute or predicate, meaning a quality we assign to something. An analytical statement is when no additional information is added. The bicycle has two wheels. The prefix "by" already implies that it has two wheels. Synthetic statement adds additional information. The bicycle is blue. You learn something new about the bike, as you could not know it was blue. Existence is an analytical statement, as existence is implied. I exist is analytical too, as I already implies existence, therefore existence is not a predicate. We need to exist to assign predicates. This applies to all things including God, ergo existence cannot be a predicate. Problem of evil. Some terminology for this section. Sin, any deliberate action, attitude, or thought that goes against God. Natural evil, events that have bad consequences when experienced by human beings. Moral evil, wicked events or acts, which are caused by human beings choosing freely to do the action in question. Evil, an act or person viewed as corrupt or wicked. Suffering, having to undergo unpleasant or traumatic experiences. Omnipotent, all-powerful. Omniscient, all-knowing. Omnipresent, everywhere. Omnibenevolent, all-loving. Epicurus, who stated that the existence of evil, God being omnibenevolent, and God being omnipotent, cannot exist all at the same time. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able to? Then he is not omnipotent. Is God able to prevent evil, but not willing to? Then he is malevolent. Is God able and willing to prevent evil? Then why is there evil? Developed by Mackie with the inconsistent triad, which shows that either God is either not omnipotent, or he is not omnibenevolent. Mackie focused on the logical problem of evil arising due to theists' understanding of omnipotence. Rejects all theodicies as they limit God's power. Paradox of omnipotence: can an omnipotent being make things that he cannot subsequently control? Or can an omnipotent being make rules which then bind himself? Without limiting God's power, refuting his omnipotence, God must either not be omnipotent, therefore not a God of classical theism, or must not exist. Hume agreed with this point, arguing that suffering is far too widespread and too vivid to be dismissed easily. This could be either applied to moral or natural evil. Mill argued world is full of evil, for example the way that innocent creatures suffers. A single hurricane destroys the hopes of a season. This is natural evil. Richard Dawkins' amount of suffering in the animal kingdom is immense and outweighs the good. This is natural evil. Dostoevsky points out the cruelty of some evil actions. For example, in Russia, seeing soldiers who would sometimes playfully slaughter innocents. This is moral evil. G.S. Paul evidential argument. Holocaust of the children. Since the time of Abraham reckoned 50 billion children have died before reaching maturity, and 300 billion children have died prenatally. Most of which did not have free will in that choice. 1900s juvenile mortality rate in England and United States of America was more than 25%. Pre-1800s it was around 50% of people who died before maturity. Rowe stated that there was a reasonable amount of suffering, but God allowing such intense suffering for both humans and animals was too much. An omnipotent, omnipresent being would know when intense suffering was about to take place, and could prevent such suffering happening, and an omnibenevolent being would prevent evil and suffering that did not hold purpose. Theodicies. One explanation was from Augustine, which was privation, that evil only is the absence of goodness. Much like how dark is only the absence of light. Toddler analogy, which argues that much like a mother to a toddler reaching out to a fire, the slap on the hand is much like the suffering we experience on earth. God is like the mother, and we are like the toddler experiencing some suffering to prevent greater suffering, being burned by the fire, but in this case hell. Irenaeus soul-making. God allows for suffering and evil, and was deliberately made with a mixture of goodness and evil. This was to grow and develop human beings into a mature and have a free relationship with God. That evil was necessary to be able to appreciate good, as it is a qualitative judgment, so there has to be other less good things for goodness to exist at all. Whilst we are in God's image, freedom of choice enables us to be moral agents. Moral autonomy, we are not yet in God's likeness, which we must develop and mature to reach our full potential. By developing our second-order goods, courage, compassion, kindness, honesty, calmness, this requires other people and suffering. The problem of hell. Irenaeus claims that those who do not achieve the likeness of God in this life will be able to continue the process in the next life, eschatological justification. Hick had similar beliefs to Irenaeus. Added, epistemic distance required between us and God to allow us to have true free will. Leibniz obedience dilutes the goodness of the action done if out of obedience rather than out of free will. This backs up this idea. We have freedom to choose not to follow teachings we are not aware of if he exists or not. If we knew we were being watched, we would not have true free will of choice. Universal salvation. Everyone will get to heaven eventually. Phillips critiqued theodicies, Wittgensteinian philosophy, as they believed that the theodicies of Irenaeus, Hick and others did not provide a satisfactory understanding. The role of evil and suffering even went so far to say they added to the evil as they legitimized it. Adds to the evil it seeks to justify. Phillips. Freud and Jung. Freud. Religion is an illusion, a neurosis, a collective neurosis. Prevents healthy psychological development to full maturity. ID unconscious desires, drives and instincts. Ego-conscious decision-making mediates between ID and superego. Superego, our mind memory of our society's moral views conditioned into us during childhood. Whilst some level of repression is good for society, Freud believed that religion repressed the ID to an unhealthy degree. Obedience to an imaginary father figure like God is a childish way to control ourselves. Freud thinks we should grow up and rationally accept that repression is for the good of society, and not to please some imaginary father figure. Obsessional neurosis. Religion often involves rituals done obsessively that religious people feel guilty if they do not do, such as prayer or washing. Freud thought religious obsessional neurosis behaviors have meaning, give a sense of control over our instincts. Impose control over ourselves, making us more secure about not giving into the temptation of our instincts in the future. Wish fulfillment and reaction against helplessness. People are afraid to die and afraid of the responsibilities of an adult life. Freud thinks people have invented the idea of an eternal father as wish fulfillment because this allows us to pretend death is not the end. Sense of being a child forever helps us deal with the difficulties of being an adult. Primal horde. Collective human memory, based around the work of Darwin, suggested that human ancestors killed an alpha male within the horde out of jealousy for their exclusive sexual access to the females. This caused a severe reaction of guilt, as this alpha male had also been highly respected and feared amongst the horde. The social order of the horde came under threat, as men became rivals for possessions of the women. Began to realize some of the wisdom in the old order they had destroyed. Created a totem to take the place of the father they had killed, uniting the horde into a tribe. Over time, the memory of the idea of the father in the tribe's culture grew to a divine level, and the totem was worshipped as a god. Oedipus complex. Viewing God as father and as omnipotent means God is beyond our rivalry or jealousy because we cannot compete with God. Allows us to let go of our feelings of jealousy that we have associated with the Father, so that lets us submit to the Father. Supporting evidence for Freud. Sublimation. We take an instinct that would go against society, or a feeling of guilt, and redirect it to fit in with social norms. Obsessional neurosis is an example of trying to avoid guilt by asserting control over ourselves. Instinctive desires from an evolutionary basis. Concept of instinctive desires and the ID. Animals do appear to have instincts they are born with. These instincts were designed by evolution to guide our behavior in a pre-social environment. Primal horde was a theory that Darwin later rejected and never published, as it was quickly disproven. Jung. Collective unconscious. Some elements from people's dreams did not come from their experience whilst awake. Must all be born with a part of the mind in common, which he called collective unconscious. Generates, and so is what explains the common themes in people's dreams that do not come from their waking experience. Saw links between these themes found in dreams and mythical religious themes. Called these themes archetypes. Archetypes. Archetypes are primordial images, part of the content of our collective unconscious. They are basic themes and images that come into our mind from the collective unconscious. Archetypes are like themes in a film, actual film itself, but then underlying themes it has which it also shares with other films. Jung saying we are born with a set of themes about life already in our unconscious mind. They shape the way experience and live and affect how we understand ourselves and others. Tribal people would share stories and shape their lives. Jung argues that religion provides stories which contain archetypes, themes, which thus help us to navigate life. Individuation. In life we act to control how others think of us, even how we think about ourselves. We only show a particular side of ourselves. Jung called this the mask. However, this causes us to suppress certain parts of ourselves, the parts we don't want to admit exist. Jung called this the shadow. Jung thinks this unhealthy. We need to accept who we are and not suppress parts of ourselves. Religious stories and the themes they contain are relatable. They contain the themes of life. Example, Cain and Abel story. God accepted Abel's sacrifice, but not Cain's. Led Cain to anger and jealousy and killing Abel. People do feel things like anger and jealousy due to the sacrifice of others working out better or them than they do for us. Need to accept rather than repress. Individuation is the name for the process of self-realization and self-acceptance. Bringing elements of ourselves back from our shadow to present our true self to the world, not a mask, called individuation. Religion as helpful for personal growth. Our lives are kind of like stories that involve themes we pick up from our unconscious. Religion contains stories with archetypal themes, and these stories can help us to develop our minds. Religious stories in different religions contain similar themes on how to live life, be a moral person, be a part of a community, be a part of a family. Religion is about providing stories that help us live well. Particular archetypes. Archetypes are not created but discovered in the collective unconscious. They are limited, but some are very common. Cannot be known directly, but generate images, themes in the conscious mind. Frame our lives. Examples: mother, child, trickster, eschatological theme. Persona, or the mask we wear. The shadow, the suppressed unconscious part of our personality. Anima or animus, our inner attitudes that take on the characteristics of the opposite sex. The self, midway between consciousness and the unconscious. The God within. Archetypes can be represented symbolically. Archetype of an old wise man represented by Dumbledore or Gandalf. Religious images can also be interpreted as interwoven with archetypes. Mary with the mother archetype, baby Jesus with the child archetype. Religious themes about the apocalypse, or world-changing events like the flood with eschatological archetypes. Jung thinks that the self archetype is symbolically represented in the same way as the God archetype. Self equals the God within us. Self helps with individuation by producing ideas of wholeness, since individuation is about becoming whole. Example mandalas are symbolic representations of the self archetype. God is symbolic representation of the self's ultimate ideal goal. God is not an external being, but an expression of the goal of individuation, the goal of being a self-realized person. Individuation journey toward becoming a full individual, quest to find God within. Religious quest because it is through the religious images the personality achieves its goal of integration. Religious images merely images of the deeper self. Supporting evidence for Jung. Recognition of religion as a source of comfort. Source of meaning, purpose. Source of guidance in times of difficulty. Source of comfort. Promotion of positive personal and social mindsets. Religious stories inspirational and motivating for people. Justifies Jung's account of them as archetypal and enabling individuation. Religious stories providing an ethical foundation for societies. Atheism. New atheism. Here are the central claims of New Atheism. Religion is unthinking. Dawkins claims religious belief promotes an unthinking attitude. People born into faith brought up to believe without question. Similar to Santa, except runs the risk of not growing out of it. As there is no choice, it should be rejected, or children. Can lead to fanaticism. For example, 9/11 as an example of unthinking. Megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully Dawkins. Religion has an infantile worldview. Dawkins claims religious view of the world are puny, pathetic and measly in comparison to truth. Scientific grandeur of reality. Religion limits the universe, and pokey little medieval universe Dawkins. Complexity of scientific model reduces religious ideas of creation to childlike belief. God being viewed as paternal, loving father is also infantile. Dawkins pointing naive this view when God in his opinion is the opposite. Religion impedes scientific progress. Blind faith over experience and empiricism. Endorsement of superstition. Claims of legitimacy in ancient texts over scientific progress, creationism. Single-minded adherence, no room for evolution of thought. Persecution of science and scientists, Galileo or Dawkins according to Dawkins. Dennett, blind faith. Gold-plated excuse to stop thinking. Dawkins. I am against religion, because it reaches us to be satisfied with not understanding the world, referring to Adam and Eve versus evolution. Theology has done nothing but talk of pestilence as the wages of sin. Harris. Science has never had a theory which has been disproven by religion. Hitchens. I'm not even an atheist so much as I am an anti-theist. Religious response to new atheism. Increase in fundamentalism. Apologists in the media. Science and religion are compatible. Archbishop Rowan Williams. Things come around, cyclical, new ideas are not new. Do not look at developed ideas of God. Do not look at the God Christians actually believe in. Religious belief enriches life rather than an explanation of life. Religion does not equal explanation, not empirical, and explores value and meaning which are non-empirical. Religion is a gift or richness beyond understanding. Kingsley supported Darwin, solved theological problem, nature manages itself. Nature self-maintaining rather than God constantly maintaining it. Poking home science, how things happen. Religion, why things happen. Provides an interwoven more complex answer. Science and religion are friends, not foes. Religious experience challenges. Caroline Davis. Davis says that mystical experiences belong to a bygone era, when read in ancient texts that seem more fitting for that time. Claims of similar mystical experiences today, time, dominated by empiricism, science, rationality, and evidential proofs, skepticism seems to be the default setting. Understanding of the world and the human mind grows, our belief in the mystical reduces. Description-related challenges. When any event claiming to be an experience of God, or the divine claim being made there is no proof. Therefore the description itself cannot be valid. It must be contradictory, or inconsistent with a normal experience, which once again prompts us to reject it. Therefore nothing can be said to be valid about this experience, far more likely to have been a misunderstood experience rather than a mystical one. There may be logical inconsistencies or incoherence within the description. For example, Teresa of Avila at first said she saw Christ at her side and then clarified that she did not really see him, but more experienced him. Subject-related challenges. Might be inconsistencies between the subject's actual behavior and what you would expect if they had the experience they claim to have. Someone who claims to have become at one with God through rejection of physical belongings would not likely not be charging hundreds of pounds to listen to accounts of his experience. For example, Benny Hinn and his magical dream coat. The person who claims to have had the experience might be unreliable. They might have a history of making untrue, fantastical claims. AKA Chicken Little. Memory is unreliable. For example, Augustine may remember hearing a voice chant "Take it" and read, but the experience may have actually been "Take it from me," or a similar misremembered statement. The person may have misremembered the experience. A person goes to the doctor for an illness might not see immediate results. They then go to a healing springs, they might attribute their recovery to this experience despite it being the work of the medication. Dreams, visions, hallucinations are regarded as unreliable. These might be the result of a psychological event, something happening in the body, or prompted by an altered state of mind. Conflicting claims between different religious experiences, referring to the fact that religious experiences that involve a God who is revealed in terms of a person's cultural background. These lead to conflicting claims, who's right? Doubtful state of person at the time of the religious experience. Davy Falkus, as an example, might be a drug addict and therefore the experience might be the result of drugs. Object-related challenges. Focuses upon the object of the experience. Likelihood of having experienced something such as the experiencer claims is so unlikely to be untrue. What are you more likely to see on a walk? A dog walker, a Piplup Pokemon, or Shiva? The dog walker seems most likely. Peter Sutcliffe, as an example, English serial killer believed God was telling him to do it. Religious experience definitions. Types of religious experiences. Visions. Something seen other than by ordinary sight. Supernatural, prophetic sight that offers some kind of prophetic or revelatory message. Dream-based, sensory-based, both containing intellectual aspects. Sensory or corporeal, appear real to the experiencer, incorporate figures or objects, appear physical often only to certain people. Seeing religious figures, Jesus, Buddha, angels, bodhisattvas. Places, heaven, pure lands, fantastic creatures, Ezekiel 1 verse 6:14. Messages to individuals or populations, Revelations 20:12-15. Examples. Saint Bernadette, 71 confirmed miracles. Saint Bernadette's vision, vision of a woman, a second vision, which was instruction to build a chapel, waters clarified and cleared, eventually healing waters revealed. Eventually died of tuberculosis. Dream-based experiences come in dream form, but still contain intellectual aspects. Teresa of Avila, God inserted a spear into her stomach, tore out the spear, leaving me all on fire with a wondrous love for God. Isaiah, an angel came down, put a coal in his mouth, and said that now he was free from sin. He was really worried when he was preaching he was speaking Elsa. Julian of Norween, God said everything was in the hazelnut, and that God loves all. Group visions, Angel of Mons, angels, archers, horseback soldiers, and Saint Gogo appeared on the battlefield and the British won. World War I battle, when the British were originally losing. Examples. Conversions. James understood conversion in psychological terms and gave it these properties. Sudden or gradual. Giving up our personal will and trusting another force, with it either freely, volitional, or with resistance, self-surrendering. Passive or active. Transformation, a new creation, Paul, 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17. Prayer. Most common form of religious experience. Blessing. Adoration. Patuchuin. Asking for forgiveness. Intercession or intervention. Gratitude. Praise. Examples such as the Lord's Prayer. Mystical. New Age practices. Conversion, vision are almost logical whilst mystical is not. Oldest form of religious experiences. The pursuit of a transcendent unitive experience with absolute reality, Miller. Personal religious experience has root and center in mystical states of consciousness, James. Mystical experiences according to Miller. Transcendent. Ineffable. Noutic. Ecstatic. Unitive. Mystical experiences according to James. Ineffability cannot be translated into words, needs to be directly experienced. Described as looking at something which exceeds beauty. Vardy described it like being in love. Example to explain this is Teresa of Avila, or Eckhart Tolle woke up in university, and he had been flooded with a deep sense of uninterrupted deep peace and bliss that morning as he walked around the city, as if I had just been born. Transiency experiences generally occur over a short period of time. Can be considered fleeting in nature. Passivity experiences are viewed as being gifted, as a result not controlled by the individual. They are events which have not been generated out of free will. Counter-argument: some spiritual rituals such as in Native American tribes, which involve the use of smoke, and other cultures, which use smoking of substances, in some way to generate a spiritual experience. Or meditation in Buddhism, as an example. Noutic quality: a state of insight into depths of truth. An understanding of a higher truth of reality, self, or divine illuminations. Therefore they hold significance and importance to the experiencer, they carry with them a sense of authority. Otto's definition of religious experience. Believed there was nothing to be gained by trying to approach religious experience with rational empirical methods. Worked on studying the feelings generated by the experiencer. Num IOUs. Experiences of awe and wonder in the presence of an almighty and transcendent God. Awareness of human nothingness when faced with holy and powerful being. Name comes from Latin numen, which means to bow the head. Experiences provide reference point for believers to interpret world through experience and beliefs attached. Reflections attempted ultimately the encounter with God is inexpressible. Mysterium tremendum. Mystery and awe-inspiring terror in the presence of an overwhelming being. There is no religion in which it does not live, as the innermost core. Without it no religion would be worthy of the name. Basically means that every religion, at their core, have this feeling about whatever is seen as grand. Fascinans charm, fascination, attractiveness despite its terror. Mysterium, wholly other, out of the ordinary. Tremendum provokes terror, dread, awe. Religious experience influences. Religious experience. A conviction that the everyday world is not the whole of reality. There is another dimension to life. It alters behavior and attitude. Hardy. Religious practice. Religious practice includes rituals, religious ceremonies and religious festivals, daily life duties and reflections. Prayer, fasting are personal or communal religious experiences that are a part of most rituals, ceremonies or festivals. Festivals are grounded in religious experiences. Faith. Belief that and belief in. For many people the move from belief that and belief in is brought about by a personal religious experience. Religious experiences enforces faith. Faith allows for religious experience. I believe that fact. I believe in personal faith and belief, deepened faith. Revelation. Revelation makes divine ultimate truth become known to humanity, to an individual. Though religious experiences communities, individuals can gain insights into ultimate truths of divinity. Quran, for example. Value for religious community, affirmation of belief system, promotion of faith value system, strengthening cohesion. Religious experience affirm leaders, the figure's role and status of authority and trustworthiness. Affirmation of belief system, Buddhism Buddha's enlightenment. Islam Muhammad receives the Quran. Christianity Jesus' birth and resurrection. Promotion of faith value system. Religious experiences can also be a source of revealing purpose, desired behaviors and ethical standards. Desired behavior, enlightenment of the Buddha, test for yourself. Ethical standard. Moses, lawgiver of Israel, religious experience gave 10 commandments with laws of covenant inscribed on them. No God comes before me. Thou shalt not praise false idols. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not lie. Respect thy mother and father. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not use God's name in vain. Honor the Sabbath day. Strengthening cohesion of a religious community. Express worship together or celebrate a past religious experience. Strengthen identity unity and one's faith. Strengthen community spiritually. Create a greater sense of unity. Establish a common identity. Reaffirm purpose, belief and faith. Value of religious experience for individuals. Faith restoring. If one's faith struggling and doubt is setting in, having a religious experience, meeting with God, can clearly remove doubts and or renew faith. Come from prayer, meditation, reading sacred text, religious community. Pilgrimage, personal journey, community journey. Hajj, one of the pillars of Islam, and each Muslim is expected to undertake this pilgrimage at least once in their lives. Strengthen faith in opposition. Hear of religious experiences. Prayer and meditation in ace of opposition can lead to religious experience. Martyrs inspire faith. Christians and Jesus suffered from the world. For example, Job. Accepting culture, community. Redemption, guilty. Accepting place of worship, sense of belonging. Religious comfort. Religious support system. Get Benny Hinn Ed. Religious experiences out of body, near death, visual ascents, miracles, answer to prayer, cured from illness. Renewal of commitment to religious ideals and doctrines. Opportunity to renew commitment to faith ideals. Commitment can be religion's experience a sense of being called. Miracles. Definitions of miracles. In some way it is unusual, or extraordinary, such as it provokes wonder. Eduquus textbook. Has a divine cause. Aquinas. Transgression of a law of nature. Hume. Widely thought at the time amongst Christian thinkers that miracles were revelation and proof of claims of religion. Transgression of a law of nature, by a particular volition of the deity or by the imposition of some invisible agent. Law of nature. Certain actions will produce certain consequences. Laws of nature rely on past experience to tell us how the natural world operates. Law of uniformity. O'Keefe. Hard interpretation. Miracles are a violation of what cannot be altered, then they are impossible. Or, what appears to be a violation is a misstated law, and a new law of nature is needed. Soft interpretation. Natural laws are not fixed and can have exceptions. Makes the issues of belief in miracles not about logical impossibility, but about whether evidence for altered law is credible and convincing. Welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws, considered to be the work of a divine agency. Oxford reference. Ganesh drinking milk 1995, happened for 24 hours and never happened again. Hume cannot prove this was Ganesh specifically, or any divine intervention specifically. Volition of deity, invisible force cannot prove this aspect, does transgress laws of nature. Aquinas contradicts a regular experience, and would be caused by something divine. However, was a Catholic so? Holland. If you believe it to be a miracle, it is a miracle. Loud since 1858, has had 71 confirmed miracles, the most recent being 1989, confirmed in 2013. Verify a miracle at Lourdes must pass a stringent analysis by professional doctors, who can ascertain whether such a healing miracle has any other discernible cause. Danila Castelli is an example of this, where their tumor disappeared. Pareidolia evolved to see patterns everywhere to aid us in survival. Realist view on miracles. Miracles are actual, objective, mind-independent events caused by God. Miracles are real interventions that go beyond natural laws. Anti-realist view. Miracles are subjective, mind-dependent, experience of profound meaning or transformations. Miracles are not literally caused by God, but reveal deeper truths about God or existence. Why do religious believers accept that miracles occur? Classical theism. God would reveal himself and interact with the world in some way. Comparison would prompt him to intervene. Omnibenevolence. Miracles are a loving God's answers to prayers. Swinburne. Confirming miracles through revelation. Examples: Buddhism hagiography. Bodhisattvas and Buddhas have stories that attribute actions to them. Miracles most often found in Mahayana. Islam. For many Muslims, the main miracle is that God-given text, the Quran. Religious believers accept that God exists, reasonable to assume God would reveal himself in some way. Especially true considering the omnibenevolent nature of God. Another reason why religious believers accept that miracles occur. Evidence from sacred writings. Miracles appearing throughout the Bible. Islam and Prophet Muhammad, who was hesitant to demonstrate miracles. The revelation of the Quran was the main miracle. Affirmation of faith traditions. Event confirms truth to believer, Jesus, faith to him. Rare miracle. Muhammad splitting the moon, affirms faith. Personal experiences. Hume versus faith. Insufficient witnesses of good sense, education and learning. Witnesses tend to be uneducated, ignorant peasantry. Someone like Richard Dawkins could be trusted if he said he experienced a miracle, as he is highly educated. Witnesses tend to be sympathetic to the idea of miracles, therefore, is more likely to describe an event as miraculous. Richard Dawkins could be trusted if he said he experienced a miracle because he is a new atheist. Also pareidolia, we like marvels and patterns. Miracles tend to be observed by ignorant and barbarous nations. Colonial views baby, you. How he said totally gross, but he is right in the fact that the countries he saw as barbarous have more miracles and education is important. Religions base their truth claims on the miraculous. They all experience miracles, but they cannot make them all right. Religious experiences contradict each other. Verification, falsification, Wittgenstein. Logical positivists. Cognitive can be true or false. Non-cognitive cannot be true or false. Logical positivists are cognitivists. Popper only have meanings if they can be verified. Verification principle could be verified by actual experience or are a statement that is true by principle. Ayer supported verificationism. If a statement is not verifiable, either meaningless or is a statement true by definition. Agreed people make non-verifiable statements that are important to them, having emotional meaning but factually meaningless. Statement can have meaning if it can be verified or has been verified, but truth can be individual and still have meaning. Verification in principle, practical verification, in practice, observe with senses equals meaning. Ayer believed if we applied verification principle to religious statements, we can see that they are meaningless. If you are talking about God as infinite or timeless, impossible for us to verify, or even explain how to verify, and therefore has no meaning. Flew, falsification principle, if something can be proven false, that shows that it has meaning. It shows that a statement asserts something. Parable of the gardener. Two people see a clearing in the forest. The first claims there is a gardener, and the other says to wait to see the gardener. Then the second claims the gardener is invisible. When they set up fences to catch the gardener, the second them claims they are a non-physical gardener. St. Paul claimed that if Jesus did not rise from the grave, then there was no point to religion. This means that if we were able to get evidence that Jesus did not rise, this would mean it would be a falsifiable statement. Critique from Swinburne. A cognitive belief about reality is factual. Facts can either be true or false. Argument for logical positivism. Knowing the truth requirements of a fact seem to be essential to knowing that fact. Hume's argument for non-cognitivism, meaning something that cannot be true or false. The cognitive part of our mind is controlled or enslaved by our non-cognitive feelings. Though Kant very famously rejected it and said that humans were capable of putting their emotions aside and acting out of purely rational motives. Critique from Hick. Eschatological verification. We can verify God after death. Counterpoints. After death there is no point in speculation. Existence after death is not verifiable. No information about post-death. Wittgenstein and language games. Religion is its own language game, and if you are not in the language game you will struggle to understand. Similar to a sports fan talking to a non-sport fan, they will struggle to understand terminology, etc. Our social reality composed of different types of social interaction, which Wittgenstein described as different games that we play. Game is meant in a very broad sense. A social practice governed by rules. Throughout life we are inducted into different social roles and games, and we learn consciously or unconsciously what behavior is considered socially correct in that context. Different ways we speak or behave, in example and interview versus with friends and family. As many different language games as there can be different types of social interactions, potentially unlimited. Similar to Sally McFague. Religious language causes problems to modern religious believers because religion is no longer a common shared base and experience. We go through life without any direct reference to God. Ancestors' world directly linked to the concept of the design. Birth, deaths, life, events, everyday living. Everything was linked to God. Experience God in private and sporadic ways. Not like in a sacramental universe, one we participate in and truly practically religious at prayer, church, liturgy. Analogy, symbol and myth. Problems with religious language. Univocal language, words have singular meaning. God is good is equal to Mary is good. When talking about God, we mean the same as when talking about ordinary concepts. Means that we can experience God's goodness in normal life. Equivocal language, words have multiple or different meanings. God is good is not equal to Mary is good. When we make statement about God, words take different meaning. God's goodness not the same as Mary's goodness. We just use the same word in different ways. God described as something which nothing greater can be conceived of. Anselm. If God's goodness is completely different to our understanding, no experience to give the world meaning. Ability to meaningfully infer and discuss God's goodness is limited and fallible. No experience. We have no experience of God and therefore cannot meaningfully talk about God, as we have no understanding. Limitation of language. Can language ever fully represent and depict God when it is limited? Aquinas' theory of analogy argues that we cannot know or say what God is, can only say what God is like. Aquinas' theory of analogy of attribution, can tell us something about the creator of a thing by looking at what it causes. Analogy o proportion. A being has a quality in a degree relative to its being. Sacred texts are unintelligible. Sally McFaig. Religious language causes problems to modern religious believers because religion is no longer a common shared base and experience. We go through life without any direct reference to God. Ancestors' world directly linked to the concept of the design. Birth, deaths, life, events, everyday living. Everything was linked to God. Experience God in private and sporadic ways. Not like in a sacramental universe, one we participate in and truly practically religious prayer, church, liturgy. Religious language mythical. Type of story with fantastical elements, bear no truth found within empirical world. Fairy tales, little values. However, reducing myths to these elements misunderstand this form to deconstruct purely by empirically based methods is miss to the meanings of those accounts. Not concerned with literal truths, more concerned with insights into the purpose of existence. Non-cognitive meaning that it cannot be true or false. Religious myths express fundamental religious truths that cannot be expressed in other form of language, ineffable. A myth is a story, imagine or true, that helps us make sense of reality. Matt. Formed of metaphorical, symbolic and analogical terms, meanings hidden beyond the literal. Myths are inspirational, literary devices that allow us to go beyond language. Bind societies and prompts actions. Types of myths, heroic myths. Accounts how individuals are able to account great adversity, triumphant as a result. Myths inspire insight into the daily struggle. Resurrection myth exists in many cultures. An agent of order is destroyed by agents of chaos only to be brought back to life again in a victory against their enemies. For example, Jesus or Siddhartha, both of which were tempted by evil, but remained unshakable in their belief and triumphed over the temptation of evil. Symbol. Tillich symbolic approach. Religious language does not try to refer to God, but instead connects our minds to God. Similar to how a poppy connects our minds to Britain, remembrance, etc. So does religious language connect to God. Symbolic meaning over literal meaning. Literal meaning is when words refer to objects or things. Such words are like signs. Religious symbols functions to spiritually connect people to the religious dimension of reality, pointing to something beyond itself. The crucifix points to Christianity. Religious language points to religion or God. Participation. Symbolic language participates in what it points to. The crucifix is part of Christianity, it doesn't just point to it. Religious language participates in the being of God, or in being itself. Reality. To be symbolic has to reveal a deeper meaning. They open up spiritual levels of reality that are otherwise closed to us. Soul. Symbols open up the levels of dimensions of the soul that correspond to those levels of reality. Randall's theory of symbolic religious language. Symbolic language explicitly non-cognitive. Randall accepts symbols are completely subjective, and symbolic language is non-cognitive unlike Tillich. Arouse emotions and motivate action. Stimulate cooperative action, bind community together. Communicate aspects of experience that cannot be expressed with literal language. Evoke, foster and clarify human experience of the divine. Analogy. Aquinas' theory of analogy of attribution, can tell us something about the creator of a thing by looking at what it causes. Analogy of proportion, a being has a quality in a degree relative to its being. Cosmological argument.